Everyone in the luxury fashion boutique froze. No one could believe Victor Laurent had just uttered those words. "We don't design for people like you. Perhaps you could try H&M." The look in simply dressed Sophia's eyes foretold the approaching storm. The House of Laurent stood on Avenue Montaigne, Paris's most prestigious fashion street. Golden light filtered through the elegant display windows, illuminating racks of clothing that represented the pinnacle of haute couture. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over pristine white marble floors, where each piece of clothing was displayed like a museum artifact, each price tag representing a month's rent for the average person. Even the air smelled different here, the scent of wealth, prestige, and privilege. At 45, Victor Laurent had built his fashion empire over 20 years. From a poor student waiting tables in the intellectual cafes of Saint-Germain-des-Prés, he was now one of the world's most recognized designers. His tall, slender frame was always impeccably dressed in black, his salt and pepper hair styled perfectly, his French accent adding to the aura of sophistication that surrounded him. His sharp jawline and piercing blue eyes were found attractive during television appearances, but his staff knew well the coldness in his gaze. His designs had graced the covers of Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, and every major fashion publication. Celebrities fought for his attention, and royalty wore his creations to state events. Last year, 4 different actors wore his designs at the Oscar ceremony. However, along with his incredible success came an equally remarkable arrogance. "Fashion isn't just clothing," he often said in interviews. "It's a language only certain people are destined to speak. Anyone can read Shakespeare, but not everyone can understand him." Fashion is the same. Today, the boutique buzzed with anticipation. In 3 days, Victor would unveil his spring collection at Paris Fashion Week, the most significant event in his calendar year. The press, industry experts, and celebrity clients were showing tremendous interest. The New York Times fashion editor had described Laurent's new collection as the most anticipated artistic expression of the year. Staff scurried about, making last-minute preparations, while elite clients received personal tours of pre-selected items not yet available to the public. The glass doors slid open, and a woman in her early 30s walked in quietly. Sophia Bennett wore simple blue jeans, white sneakers, and a plain white t-shirt. Her brown hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she wore no visible makeup. She carried a modest handbag and moved with an unassuming grace, taking in the splendor of the boutique with curious eyes. Within the crowded boutique, she stood out with her minimalist appearance, though for most people here, for the wrong reasons. Claudette, the senior sales associate, approached with a practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. In her mid-40s, dressed in an impeccable Chanel suit, she was a living example of Parisian elegance. "Good afternoon, madam. How may I assist you today?" Her tone carried the subtle implication that she already knew there would be no assistance possible, a technique frequently used in the Laurent boutique. "I'm just browsing, thank you," Sophia replied in perfect French, though her accent revealed her American origins. "Your new collection looks beautiful." Claudette nodded stiffly. American tourists often visited the boutiques, wanted to take photos, and wasted the valuable time of the sales staff. "Indeed, our pieces are quite exclusive. The evening gown in the center display begins at 15,000 euros. This price point was usually enough to discourage casual visitors." Sophia moved toward a silk blouse displayed on a mannequin. The pure cream-colored silk shimmered almost like a pearl under the light. The minimalist design showcased incredible details and craftsmanship that only a skilled eye would notice. "This is lovely. May I see it in a size 8, please?" The sales associate hesitated, exchanging glances with another staff member. The instructions were clear. Time was limited and should be dedicated only to certain customers. "I'm afraid that particular piece is reserved for our regular clients." "I see," said Sophia with slight disappointment. "What about that long dress in the window?" "I love the color." Claudette inwardly sighed. "That piece is from the special collection and is on display only for special invitees. We're preparing for Paris Fashion Week, you understand." "Of course," said Sophia, nodding understandingly but with a sparkle in her eyes. "Fashion Week is always so exciting. All the new collections, the media attention." Across the boutique, Victor Laurent was personally assisting Countess Dubois. The Countess was one of the most influential names in Parisian society and was looking for a special piece for the annual charity ball to be held the following Saturday. A gray white-haired woman in her 60s, she was the epitome of grace and nobility. She wore a modest but extraordinarily expensive Dior suit. "Violet, my dear friend," said Victor, gently holding the woman's hand. "Doesn't this turquoise dress remind you of that magnificent Monet painting in your old apartment on Rue de Rivoli? You'll look stunning in it." Laurent's voice carried a professional softness, even when speaking with a friend. His voice was a design element in itself, calibrated so that each sentence would be a selling point. Countess Dubois smiled. "You always find the right references, Victor. I'll certainly try it on." She had an unerring eye for fashion and appreciated how Laurent's designs blended cultural references with fashion genius. Victor's eye caught the modestly dressed woman standing next to the silk blouse. A momentary conflict appeared on his face, a conflict of business and reputation. Of course, the boutique was open to everyone, but he knew some customers came just to look at the windows. And with Paris Fashion Week just days away, every minute was valuable. Every year, he would work almost without sleep for 3 to 4 weeks for the biggest shows. "Just a moment, please, Violet," he said gently to the Countess, then moved toward Claudette and Sophia. His steps echoed confidently on the marble floor. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his voice resonating throughout the boutique. Victor Laurent's presence always drew attention. Not just his physical appearance, but the air of authority he carried filled the room. Claudette bowed slightly. "No, Monsieur Laurent. The customer was curious about some pieces, and I was explaining her options." Her voice was professional but with an undertone of concern. She didn't want to disturb her boss. Victor examined Sophia from head to toe. It was a learned skill, the ability to assess fabric quality, a garment's price, and a customer's potential value at a glance. After 20 years in the clothing industry, he could tell at first sight who was a real customer and who was just passing time. What he saw didn't impress him. The white t-shirt was probably from a chain store, and her jeans didn't look like a luxury brand. Her shoes were clean but outdated. "Madam," he said with a slight smile, "thank you for your interest in our collection. However, I see that we may not have anything suitable for your style or budget today." His tone was soft, but the message was sharp. Sophia looked directly into his eyes. Victor saw something unexpected in her eyes. Not fear or shame, but calm intelligence, perhaps even amusement. "Perhaps you're mistaken about me, Monsieur Laurent. I really like this silk blouse." Victor maintained his smile, but his eyes were cold. He hated when people insisted on being in places unsuitable for their status. "I understand. However, this blouse is a special design. Production is limited and difficult to say, but quite expensive." Victor would technically never throw anyone out of his boutique. That could lead to bad press, but he was clear enough to ensure the message was understood. Sophia replied calmly, "I can see the price. 2,800 euros. I wondered if it's as soft as it looks." Victor's patience was wearing thin. Countess Dubois and other elite clients were watching, and time was running out. Stress, combined with his habit of having a few glasses of very expensive wine in the evenings, sometimes caused him to lose his filter. "Madam, perhaps another store would be more suitable. We design for a certain clientele." Sophia's eyebrows rose. "What kind of clientele, Monsieur Laurent?" There was genuine curiosity in her voice. A silence fell in the boutique. Customers and staff began to watch the conversation. 2 women were whispering near a nearby rack. A male customer was looking over his glasses. There was an air of momentary drama. Victor displayed his charismatic smile, usually reserved for the media, but there was impatience in his eyes. He hadn't slept much in the last 6 months. He had worked nights to complete the new collection on time. 3 assistants had resigned, and the main fabric supplier had delayed delivery. The press had said his previous collection was more repetitive than evolutionary. Investors were holding their breath. And now, just days before the most important show of his life, was he wasting his precious time on this tourist? Understand that we create art, not just clothing. Our pieces are designed for those who can understand and appreciate them. Not everyone understands every painting in the Louvre, do they? His tone was still polite, but there was condescension underneath. Sophia didn't respond, just waited. This silence made Victor even more uncomfortable. People usually didn't contradict him, especially not in his own establishment. Victor continued, now with more obvious impatience in his voice. Frankly, madam, we don't design for people like you. Perhaps you could try H&M. It would be more suitable for your budget and style. Everyone in the boutique froze. Claudette's eyes widened, looking at her boss in shock. These words had gone beyond Victor's usually carefully crafted public relations image. Behind closed doors in the elite world of the fashion industry, such things might be whispered, but never openly expressed. However, Sophia didn't seem as fragile as she was told. In her eyes, there was almost an amused gleam. I understand, she said calmly. So, who do you design for, Monsieur Laurent? Victor chuckled slightly. He was both surprised and slightly irritated that the woman wasn't retreating. We design for a clientele with elegance, style, and understanding. We design for culture, refinement, and of course, a certain social status. Our world ... He gestured to the boutique with a hand movement, is not for everyone. Countess Dubois squinted her eyes as she watched this exchange. She knew that Victor's reputation had actually been hard-won. His family wasn't wealthy, certainly not aristocratic. He had started his career as a scholarship student in art school. Now he seemed to have forgotten his own modest origins. Sophia nodded. Thank you for your candor. Goodbye, Monsieur Laurent. She turned and began walking toward the door. Some customers appeared relieved. The incident was over. The uncomfortable situation had passed. Others, especially an elderly gentleman, were looking with slight disgust. Whether at Victor's behavior or Sophia's presence, it wasn't clear. Victor smiled triumphantly and turned to Countess Dubois. I apologize, my dear friend. Where were we? He took a deep breath, returning to his professional persona. His hand pointing to the turquoise dress trembled slightly. Stress, fatigue, perhaps a bit of guilt. Before reaching the door, Sophia turned around. By the way, she said, in a voice loud enough for the entire boutique to hear, someone from my office will call tomorrow to confirm runway position number 15 for your show on Saturday. Of course, we're always open to preferring another designer. The smile on Victor's face froze. My show? Which office? His voice cracked slightly. His heart suddenly accelerated. He sensed this was someone he didn't recognize but should have. Oh, I'm sorry, said Sophia, now with a different posture, more upright, more confident. It was as if a mask had fallen. I didn't introduce myself. Sophia Bennett, Vogue Global. I'm the new creative director of Paris Fashion Week. There was complete silence in the boutique. Victor's face turned white. His lips parted, but no sound came out. Countess Dubois' eyebrows rose in surprise. She had heard the name Sophia Bennett, one of the fastest rising names in the fashion world recently. She had come from New York to Paris with a mission to democratize fashion with her innovative, inclusive vision. I just started in my new position, Sophia continued, and decided to visit all the designers and boutiques. How shall I say, to see how they really operate when there are no cameras. It was quite illuminating. She turned toward the door. Good day. Victor finally found his voice. Ms. Bennett, wait. I'm afraid there's been a huge misunderstanding. Please ... But Sophia was already gone, the glass doors silently closing behind her. She left behind a boutique in chaos. There was panic in the boutique. Victor was yelling at the staff. Find her, now! The new creative director of Vogue and we... God! He ran his hands through his hair, ruining his perfect style. Claudette, call her immediately. Find her office. Do whatever it takes. Claudette was trembling. Monsieur, we didn't get her business card. Then call Vogue. Someone must know Sophia Bennett. As the staff rushed to the phones, other customers quietly headed for the exit. The drama had turned unpleasant, and no one wanted to be part of it anymore. Countess Dubois quietly coughed. Victor, if I can help, I know Sophia Bennett. We met at a charity event in New York last month. She really is the new creative director of Vogue and on the Paris Fashion Week committee. Victor's heart stopped. She's your friend? Please, Violet, You need to explain to her, I'm not like that. I was tired. Time pressure. Countess Dubois shook her head with a bitter smile. Not exactly a friend, Victor. And frankly, what I saw here today surprised me too. Perhaps I should reconsider. Reconsider? What? My outfit for Saturday's ball, and perhaps my designer. The Countess picked up her handbag with a polite but firm manner. See you, Victor. I hope Fashion Week goes well. And she too was gone, leaving Victor desperate in his increasingly empty boutique. The door opened again, and a young woman rushed in. Victor's assistant Isabel was breathless, holding a tablet. Monsieur Laurent, urgent. The Paris Fashion Week programs have just been printed, and your show, it's not there. Victor felt his world collapsing. Being removed from the Paris Fashion Week program could mean the end of his career. Social media would explode. Sales would crash. Investors would flee. In an instant, everything he had dedicated the last 20 years of his life to was slipping through his fingers. Because of an arrogant moment, a few thoughtless sentences. That's impossible. Call the committee now. Call Charles. Call my lawyers. Victor's voice no longer carried the controlled, sophisticated tone. He was panicking, his voice cracking. The next hours passed in chaos. Phones went unanswered. Emails weren't replied to. Victor's once effective connections suddenly seemed busy. Finally, an official-looking email came from the Paris Fashion Week committee. Dear Mr. Laurent, we regret to inform you that the slots allocated for this year's Paris Fashion Week have been modified due to excessive demand. We suggest you reapply for your show next season. As evening darkness fell, Victor Laurent sat in his office, desperately answering phones. Nothing had worked. There was no way to reach Sophia Bennett. Her office was rejecting all calls. The committee remained silent about program changes. The media had already caught the scent, and rumors of Laurent being removed from Paris Fashion Week had begun to circulate. Twitter was already filled with the hashtag #Laurent canceled. While thinking his career was coming to an end, the worst part was knowing that his own behavior had brought this about. Victor looked in the mirror. What had happened to him 25 years ago when he came to Paris as a poor student full of hopes? Had success changed him that much? Had he completely forgotten his own humble origins? Just as he was about to despair, his assistant rushed into the room. Monsieur, an email from Ms. Bennett. She wants to meet you at the boutique tomorrow morning at 8. Victor took a deep breath, thinking there might still be hope. He didn't sleep all night, worked on strategies, prepared apologies, thought of offers. This could be the most important meeting of his life, the meeting that changed the trajectory of his life due to a moment of anger. The next morning, Victor Laurent arrived 2 hours early. The boutique sparkled like crystal, every corner perfectly cleaned. Fresh flowers stood on every table. Champagne was being chilled. All staff were wearing their best uniforms and had received their instructions. Kind, respectful, flawless. Victor was wearing his best suit, the perfect picture of remorse. At exactly 8 o'clock, Sophia Bennett walked in. Unlike the simple clothes she wore yesterday, today she was wearing a stylish Burberry trench coat, elegant pants, and a soft blouse that evoked minimalist luxury. Her hair was now professionally styled, and she wore minimal but perfect makeup. Every step, every movement, every look was filled with confidence and authority. This was not innate but earned authority. Ms. Bennett, said Victor, rushing to her side, thank you so much. I'm grateful you came. I don't know how to apologize for what happened yesterday. I acted completely out of character. Unforgivable. Sophia raised her hand. Monsieur Laurent, time is valuable, especially before Fashion Week. Let's speak frankly. Of course, said Victor hurriedly. Please sit down. Champagne? Coffee? Croissant? Brought this morning from the best bakery in Paris. No, thank you, said Sophia, standing in the middle of the boutique. I think yesterday you showed your true character exactly, Monsieur Laurent. And unfortunately, this is a character that I and Vogue no longer wish to represent. Victor's face fell. Please, you don't understand. That wasn't me. The stress, the pressure of the show. I understand perfectly, said Sophia, cutting him off. Stress and pressure reveal our character. They don't hide it. The fashion industry has long been characterized by exclusivity, elitism, and discrimination. At Vogue Global, we believe there's no longer room for these values. But my designs, Victor stammered, my 20 years of work. Your designs are excellent, Monsieur Laurent. No one can deny your talent. But fashion is no longer just about clothes. It's about values, inclusivity, accessibility. And yesterday, you represented exactly the opposite of this. There was compassion in Sophia's eyes, but she said with determination, "The official confirmation of your removal from the program will be published this morning." Victor staggered as if he had received a physical blow. He held onto a chair. "Please, my career, my everything. Will 20 years of work disappear in an instant?" His voice was no longer that of the confident, sophisticated designer. It was the voice of a frightened, almost elderly man. For the first time, a softening appeared on Sophia's face. Despite her youth, there was deep wisdom in her eyes. "I'm here to offer you an alternative, Monsieur Laurent. One more chance." Victor raised his head, with a gleam of hope in his eyes. "Yes? Anything. I'll do anything." "Vogue is initiating a change in the fashion world," said Sophia, "a campaign focused on inclusive design, accessible luxury, and body diversity. We believe the fashion industry should be more democratic, more inclusive. It should be inspiring rather than elitist." Victor thought, recognizing a bitter truth, that for all those years he had accepted the established structure of the fashion industry without questioning it. Perhaps even when he had once been excluded himself, he had worked too hard to reinforce the same system. "We offer to give you back your show," Sophia continued, "but on one condition. You must rethink your collection for consumers of every size, shape, and price range." "But that's impossible. My show is in 3 days." Victor's voice rose in panic. Months of preparation, countless rehearsals, thousands of hours of work. Would it all be changed? "I'm aware," said Sophia. "That's why we'll provide you with some models, not just from traditional model types, and a new stylist to work with you. Also, an urgent inclusivity training for all your sales staff." Victor Laurent was facing the biggest challenge of his career: to remain in his old comfortable elitism and perish, or to change, adapt, and perhaps become a pioneer in a new fashion world. Everything he had gained in the last 20 years was at risk, but perhaps on the brink of losing everything, he would rediscover his true values. "We have no time," he said hesitantly. "Redesigning the entire collection, finding new models, rehearsals." "You're a genius, aren't you, Monsieur Laurent?" said Sophia with a slight smile. "Nothing is impossible for you, is it?" Her eyes pointed to a poster hanging on the runway when Victor released his first collection. It read, "Impossible is just a possibility that hasn't been discovered yet." Victor smiled, remembering his young, idealistic version. Back then, he truly believed that fashion was a means of expression, that it could celebrate everyone's confidence and beauty. When had he become so cynical and exclusive? "I'm impressed by you and your vision, Ms. Bennett. I accept." He extended his hand to seal the collaboration. "Perfect," said Sophia, shaking his hand. "Our models will be here within an hour. And by the way, my silk blouse, size 8, should be ready. After all, I can afford 2,800 euros. She smiled slightly. Victor blushed with shame. "Of course, and please, accept it as my gift." Sophia shook her head. "No, Monsieur Laurent. This is part of the change. No more privileges. Just fair work, fair trade. I'll pay the full value for the blouse, just like any other customer would." Victor realized that Sophia Bennett was not just a fashion editor, but also a visionary. And perhaps by coincidence, she had come to save not just his career, but his soul. The next 72 hours were the most intense, challenging, and transformative time of Victor Laurent's life. His atelier was working day and night. Designers, seamstresses, assistants, all were struggling to bring the new vision to life. When the models provided by Sophia arrived, Victor greeted them with surprise. Among them were women in their 40s plus-size models from different ethnic backgrounds, and even a model who used a wheelchair. None of them fit traditional runway standards, but all had incredible grace and confidence. "Are these models too?" An assistant asked in surprise. Yes, said Victor determinedly, and one day all runways will be this diverse. Victor saw a part of his own past in the model's eyes. The desire to be accepted, the need to be seen and feel valued. Wasn't designing for these people what he had once dreamed of? Making people feel more beautiful, more powerful with his clothes? The stylist provided by Vogue, Isabella Romano from Milan, was a sharp-eyed woman with a practical approach. Look, Monsieur Laurent, she said, looking at the collection. Your designs are great, but we need to adapt them to different body types. Forget traditional fashion rules. Elegance lies not in a certain body size, but in how the garment makes the wearer feel. At first, Victor resisted. 20 years of habits wouldn't change overnight. But slowly, designing for different body types became first frustrating, then inspiring, and finally enlightening. Each body type had its own beauty, each silhouette its own elegance. He encountered design problems he had never thought of before, and the creative excitement of solving them rekindled a passion he hadn't felt in a long time. Why did you design this dress this way? Asked Elise, the model who used a wheelchair. Because, said Victor, I wanted it to provide freedom of movement, but also look elegant in a seated position. The fabric was chosen to not wrinkle even when sat on for long periods. Elise smiled. Finally, a designer who thinks of me. Thank you. At that moment, Victor realized that fashion was not just about appearance, but also about functionality, comfort, and most importantly, the value of every human being. On the fourth day of Paris Fashion Week, under the massive glass of the Grand Palais, Victor Laurent's new vision was introduced to the world. The show had been organized literally at the last minute. Sophia had given Laurent position number 15 when an unexpected opening emerged, but only after he had accepted all her conditions. The runway was filled with women of different ages, body types, and ethnic backgrounds alongside traditional models, all wearing designs that carried Laurent's elegance and vision. The last-minute crisis news leaked to the media had made the show the most anticipated event of Fashion Week. Everyone was curious how one of the most elite designers in the fashion world would embrace the principles of diversity and inclusivity. When Elise came onto the runway in her wheelchair, there was first a shocked silence among the audience, then enthusiastic applause. Victor watched from behind the scenes how this powerful woman carried his design with grace, and his eyes watered. Fashion was a means of expression, yes, but it was also a tool for empowerment. As the last model walked onto the runway, Victor felt his breath catch. Sophia Bennett was wearing a perfect version of that silk blouse, her elegance and confidence filling the entire hall. The garment was the same, but how differently he had treated the woman in simple jeans and sneakers in the boutique yesterday. It wasn't the clothes that had changed, it was Victor's perspective. When the show ended, the applause was deafening. Victor Laurent, feeling truly humble for the first time in his life, stepped onto the runway. Sophia stood beside him, and together they bowed in greeting. Thank you, Victor whispered. You didn't just save my career. You made me a better designer and perhaps a better person. Sophia smiled. Fashion is about transformation, Monsieur Laurent. Sometimes clothes transform, and sometimes those who design them. The party after the show brought together the most important names in the fashion world. This time, Victor wasn't busy talking to celebrities in the upper class of society. Instead, he was busy thanking the different models from his show, his team, and many staff members he had never paid attention to throughout the event. Critics praised Laurent's new direction. Words like revolutionary, game-changing, the future were floating in the air. The fashion editor of the New York Times described the collection as a turning point in the democratization of fashion. How did you achieve this change in one day? Asked a journalist. Victor smiled. The change didn't happen in one day. Actually, all these designs were always inside me. I just needed the right motivation to release them. He looked at Sophia, standing at the other end of the room talking to other designers. And the push from the right person. Countess Dubois approached Victor through the crowd. Bravo, old friend. I knew Sophia wanted to teach you a lesson, but I didn't expect the result to be so magnificent. Victor looked at her in surprise. You two, planned this? The Countess smiled. Maybe a little. Sophia and I have long believed that the fashion world needs to change. Sometimes people need to be gently encouraged, and sometimes a more dramatic approach is necessary. She raised her glass. To change. To change, said Victor, touching his glass to the Countess's, and to second chances. That evening, late at the party, as Victor Laurent walked along the Champs-Élysées, he thought of the day he first came to Paris. He was 21, with only a few francs in his pocket, but his head was full of big dreams. He believed fashion would empower people, democratize beauty. Along the way, he had lost something: his humility, his vision, perhaps a part of his soul. But perhaps on the verge of losing everything, he had actually regained it all. 3 weeks later, the cover of Vogue Global featured a piece from Victor Laurent's new collection, worn by a 52-year-old size 14 model. The article inside was titled "Fashion Revolution, Laurent's Second Coming." The article, signed by Sophia Bennett, emphasized the future of the fashion industry, the importance of inclusivity and accessibility. A few months later, the House of Laurent had completely transformed. The boutique was still luxurious and elegant, but now more inviting and inclusive. Claudette and other sales staff had been trained to treat all customers with the same respect and attention. Diversity among the staff had increased. Employees from different backgrounds, ages, and body types now represented Laurent's vision. Victor had launched a new side brand called Laurent Accessible, pieces carrying the core elements of his main collection, but appealing to a wider audience. Sustainability and ethical production were now core values of the brand. Most importantly, Victor Laurent himself had changed. The designer who once designed only for the elite now believed everyone had the right to feel special. He had become an active advocate in the fashion industry, a voice speaking for diversity, inclusivity, and accessibility. One day, when a young woman wearing a simple white t-shirt and jeans entered the boutique, Victor personally approached her and smiled. "Welcome," he said. "How can I help you?" The young woman smiled. "Actually, I came for inspiration. I'm in fashion school, and your last collection, it really impressed me." Victor saw his younger self in this eager student. "Then come," he said. "Let me show you my atelier, and maybe one day you'll create your own revolution." The fashion world cares about who wears what, but true style is about how one behaves. Victor Laurent had received the most bitter lesson of his life from the most unexpected teacher, and like his magnificent designs, this lesson would be lasting. A famous designer once said, "Fashion passes, style remains." However, Victor Laurent now believed, elitism passes, inclusivity remains. And perhaps with this new vision, the Laurent legacy would continue longer than ever, not just as a luxury brand, but as a symbol of change and inclusivity. If you enjoyed our video, don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever been judged by appearance like Victor Laurent? Or have you judged someone else? How do you think true elegance should be measured? Where in the world are you watching from today? Share with us in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories of unexpected heroes. Retry your